first-person shooter games. Well, we wanted to narrow down our top 10 favorite FPS games of 2017 for you guys. Now, of course, know that these are our recommendations, and you'll probably disagree, so let us know your top 5 or top 10 in the comments too. But let's get started off with number 10, with Robo Recall. There are a lot of shooting galleries on VR platforms, but Robo Recall feels like the most fully realized one. It feels like an actual game and not just kind of like a tech demo. Popping dudes and throwing the bodies at other robots while figuring out new strategies for taking on the increasing enemy hordes is really fun. It's fun as hell. It rewards tactical approaches and actual skill shots, and it comes from Epic, so it's one of the best looking VR games to date. Seriously, it looks really good. It looks like a trailer, but it can get pretty intense after a while, so it's not just for VR newbies. You will get a little sweaty if you play for a while, but sometimes that's a good thing. But at number 9, we have Get Even. This is a weird game, and one that I was actually pretty lukewarm on at first, but thankfully it seems like the Steam community has embraced it, and it's pretty interesting once you dig deep enough. From the outset, it probably looks really generic to you. It's kind of like a revenge thriller, but it kind of makes things a little more psychological and cerebral and flips some things on its head in ways you wouldn't really expect. I don't want to spoil anything for those of you that do check it out, but it's a fairly competent, simple shooter with a few interesting little stealth weapons like a corner gun, but besides that, you're really experiencing this for the weird story. Even that is a little weird. Some of the voice acting is a little lame, but I don't know, just the way they tried it, it's still just very endearing, and myself and a lot of other people have found it kind of like an underrated little hit. It's not perfect at all, but it definitely gets points for being really different and doing things in a shooter you wouldn't usually expect. Because at number 8, we gotta talk about Star Wars Battlefront 2. Yeah, I know, we put this on the list, we argued at it for a while, but we're thinking maybe, just maybe EA fixes it and makes it better, and removes all the microtransaction stuff and reworks a progression system. At its core, the actual bones of the game is a decent, fun, casual, arcadey shooter, and we think if the stuff was removed, it would hold up pretty damn well. Now, of course, we honestly don't think you should go out and buy the game right now as it stands because, you know, EA has done some poor things with monetizing the game. But again, maybe in the future, I just want you guys to know, as a Star Wars fan and a fan of the old Battlefront games, maybe this could be good because when you just play it and you forget about all that other stuff, it's pretty decent. The first-person shooting is, like I said, arcadey, but it is tight, the movement is fast, it's fun, there's way more vehicles, way more level and map variety that make all the difference in the world from the last Battlefront game. So we're putting it on the list, but we're putting it as like a TBD. Definitely wait and see on this one down the line, but maybe just don't completely write it off just yet. Again, that's just us. At number 7, we have Resident Evil 7, a game that is technically a first-person shooter. We had some debate about whether or not we were going to put this on the list, but ultimately, we decided to because it turns out you do actually shoot a lot of things in this game, and it feels good. I think that might actually be one of the best aspects of Resident Evil 7, the fact that it is very much a first-person shooter video game, but it still has those hardcore, old-school survival mechanics that just make it feel really different. It's satisfying, it can be pretty tough, and it's stressful, and that's what a good survival horror game should do, but it also is cool because it's in first person and you have cool guns and you get to shoot things. And believe me, by the end of the game, you end up shooting a lot of things. Not only that, there's all that other content where you get to play as Chris Redfield and shoot even more things. I was skeptical of the whole perspective shift with Resident Evil before this, but now that it's a first-person shooter or first-person game, I'm pretty into it, I'm not gonna lie. And if you haven't checked it out, you should, because it's equal parts scary, equal parts fun, and equal parts challenging, and it's shaping up to be one of our favorite games of the year in general. Because at number 6, we have Prey, a AAA game that is a little less conventional. It's more of like a spiritual successor to the System Shock games, and I guess like a spiritual successor to BioShock as well. It's very, very systems heavy. It's not really about running and gunning. It's more about thinking and using your brain and managing your resources. But at its core, it is a first-person shooter with some combat and with a lot of tense and scary moments. It's not the most fast-paced game, but there's still a lot of stuff going on to really keep you on your toes. It's the fact that there are mimics hiding anywhere in the game, disguised as inanimate objects ready to jump out as little creepy aliens. It is cool. It makes for a really cool experience. And if you're looking for something a bit more technical and a bit more brainy instead of just a mindless shooter with a pretty good story and presentation and a pretty solid and different ending, definitely look into Prey because it is very different and it's something else. It's been a little divisive. Some people are divided on it, but we think you should ultimately check it out. But at number 5, we have Dusk, an indie first-person shooter that is the PC gamer's game. If you grew up playing games in the 90s like Quake, Heretic, even Doom, stuff like that, I think Dusk will be right up your alley. It is 100% unabashedly an old school hardcore first-person shooter with lots and lots of demons and KKK members and evil wizards to shoot. And even though it is super old school and really derivative of that old stuff very lovingly, it's unlike anything you'll play this year. It's episodic, and the first episode is right now, and they're also releasing a big multiplayer mode called Dusk World, and just with the core shooting mechanics with like the lightning fast gameplay, smooth frame rates, and tons of different weird graphic options and filters, it just makes it feel old but also just fresh enough. But ultimately, it's challenging, it's lightning fast, and you can only play this game with a keyboard and mouse. So if those things are usually up your alley, Dusk is yours. Go for it. Now, at number 4, we have Call of Duty World War II, a game that, the Call of Duty series usually ranks a bit higher on our list every year, just because we are such a big fan of them, even though they still get so much hate. Call of Duty World War II has left fans, longtime fans, pretty divided. Ultimately, the multiplayer is still taking foot. We're still not totally convinced, especially with the fact that headquarters is only still getting worked out. And the single-player campaign seemed to have just kind of went by the numbers. It's certainly not bad, it's pretty entertaining, and it's good for a playthrough, but it just doesn't really dazzle, especially not like Infinite Warfare's did. But nonetheless, it still is a well-crafted shooter. The Call of Duty games, that formula, that actual gameplay, the controls have not changed for years for a reason. It's solid, it plays well, it's fast, and the multiplayer is addictive still after all these years. Maybe it's still not perfect, maybe it's a little different, maybe it's not the Black Ops 3 you were hoping for, maybe the zombies doesn't totally live up to the hype, but even with all that stuff, if you turn your brain off, you will still have an absolute good time with this game. And it's not an all-out disaster like some people are making it seem. Honestly, even if some of the more hardcore elements aren't totally perfect, I still just really appreciate the boots on the ground gameplay. I'm really kind of sick of sliding and dodging and boost jumping. But that's just me, someone who now feels like an old person. But at number 3, we have Destiny 2, a game that is very much still for Destiny fans. If you weren't one of the people that got hooked on the original Destiny, Destiny 2 doesn't do too much to fix overall complaints, but what it does do is kind of just fine-tune the experience that was the original Destiny that people did get into, and just makes it that much better. If that makes sense, if that sounds kind of weird, it's still very much structured like the first Destiny. People can argue that there is not enough to do, but that's kind of how Destiny's content structure goes. Whether you like it or not, what you will get here, though, is some pretty interesting worlds to shoot your way through, and it's good that they're interesting because you're going to be spending a lot of time in them because there are so many different new strikes and little random pop-up missions to take care of and constantly just keep grinding, because Destiny 2 is all about the grind. And if you're looking for a good first-person shooter grind, I think this is it. Not only that, in terms of multiplayer games this year, I think this is one of the best ones that you can play with friends, because Destiny 2 really fires on all cylinders when you're playing a raid or a strike with friends that you know, because it can be challenging and it can require actual teamwork besides just running and gunning. And honestly, as someone who was kind of converted to Destiny late, I think it's a pretty fulfilling experience. Because at number 2, speaking of old people, we have Quake Champions. We had a lot of games trying to go for the old school, fun, competitive, arena-based nature this year, like Lawbreakers, but we decided to go with Quake Champions because it is such a good time. The community isn't out of this world huge, but it is dedicated from the alphas and the betas. This is a finely crafted Quake game. Even if it seems a little bit different with some of the character class-ish stuff, don't be scared by that because it's not as jarringly different as you would think. It's not Overwatch Quake. Not at all. It is exactly 100% Quake. It just looks 10 times better, but it still plays just as you would want it to. It's super fast. It's very vertical. And again, like some of the other games I'm saying on this list, it is very much a game you should play with a keyboard and mouse. But however you'll play it, I think if you're looking for something to really chew on, something deep, something that's not exactly easy to get into, I think you will find Quake Champions pretty satisfying. But believe it or not, at number 1, we have Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus. We really didn't expect to put a single-player first-person experience as number 1 on the list, but Wolfenstein 2 is just so good, man. It really kind of just capitalizes on Wolfenstein The New Order's whole borderline insanity stuff and going full into it. This is a game that really, really tells a weird story, something you would really not expect, but it's got some really awesome characters that you're going to want to get to know and laugh at and cry with. And with all that stuff, whether it's lighthearted and funny and really batshit crazy, or serious and gritty and grimdark, it walks that line absolutely perfectly, and it's just a really good single-player campaign to play through from beginning to end. It's also not short, and it's very replayable, and the game itself is just straight-up fun. While it's not as run-and-gunny as I think it should be, like something like Doom, it is incredibly fast, really, really brutal, and gory, and fun, and challenging. This is one of the hardest shooters we've played this year, but it is so satisfying, and we think it's worth your time. BJ Blazkowicz is like one of the coolest first-person shooter characters right now, and I think honestly you will enjoy getting to know him and getting to kill